Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan Ennis Pierce. This is a Ukraine war news update, first part thereof, I guess, for the 14th of February 2024. Before I get to, I'm only going to do just a short geopolitical news piece because that's what I had left to do over from yesterday before collecting on a daily basis my news sort of sources and bits of information. What I will say is that there is some very interesting news coming out from Crimea area at the moment. The Ukrainians are claiming, or at least many sources are claiming, that there has been another Russian ship sunk. So off Katsiveli in temporarily Russian-occupied Crimea, Ukraine, the ammunition store on a warship blew up and it sank. Another vessel is on scene, and a submarine was spotted nearby. Professionally and methodically, Ukraine is winning the Battle of the Black Sea. That's one bit of footage of an explosion in the distance. Here's another one. There's information on the web that a Russian landing ship sank after explosions in Yalta, Mishkor, Alupka, and Simeiz in the temporarily occupied Crimea. So possibly a number of places getting hit in Crimea. We are waiting for official confirmation or information. In Crimea, something loudly explodes in the sea near Alupka and Simeiz. Residents write about strong shockwaves. Someone reports a ship completely drowning, and Russians dispatched another ship and a submarine to search the area. Anti-submarine helicopter Ka-27 is also visible. So a number of different videos and pieces of evidence to piece together here. Again, someone here saying explosions were heard in the Mishkol region of Crimea. Crimean sources report that a large amphibious assault ship was hit and sunk. Russians are shouting that 6 drones were destroyed and intercepted. If they were destroyed and intercepted by a ship, that is really not bad. So, could be some really good news for the Ukrainians in light of some troubling news from places like Avdiivka, where the Ukrainians really are having a huge effect in the army in the war. Sorry, is in the Black Sea. Okay, moving on to geopolitical stuff. Just a few bits to share with you today. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said that Russia should not underestimate Western support for Ukraine. She emphasized that Europe will continue to support Ukraine as long as necessary and suggested that increased coordination among Poland, France, and Germany could enhance this. Now, I am totally worried. I keep telling you about how there's a lack of equipment on the front line and things are looking very challenging for the Ukrainians, very challenging indeed. And it is only down to just a lack of stuff. So when I hear rhetoric like this, I am somewhat comforted. I think Europe is in this process of realizing how bloody serious this thing is in Ukraine, and the politicians that are in power are making the right sounds, and even some in Germany, some of the opposition politicians too, which is good news, right? So I think there is this move towards a greater support for Ukraine. Now, that's about supporting the rhetoric with action, and I think Germany is doing that. And leading by example in this context. Now, the Baltics are also playing their part, and these are small nations, but all the nations that are closest to Russia are feeling this and are the ones that are rhetorically backing Ukraine the hardest at the moment. There is a lot of self-interest there. These are the nations that border Russia as well. So I find it fascinating that the Russian Interior Ministry has apparently put Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas on the wanted list. So the Media Zona publication leaked the full wanted database of the Russian Interior Ministry. This is the first time that Russia has opened a criminal case against the current head of foreign state. The Russian authorities are also looking at Estonian State Secretary Taimar Peterkop, Lithuanian Culture Minister Simonas Kairis, and members of the Latvian Seima. In addition, 2 Polish officials and the director of the Institute of National Memory of Poland were included in the wanted list of the Russian Interior Ministry. Now, although this appears to be a leak, when Russia do things like this actually falls into the hands of the Western allies of Ukraine. This is actually something that will aid the unity and opposition against what Russia is doing. Because if you say to effectively here Estonia that your prime minister is now on a Russian wanted list, everyone in Estonia is going to be like on the defensive, going back and saying, "Well, screw you, Russia." Whether you are a fan of Kaya Kallas in terms of domestic policy or not, right? She may not be your cup of tea. if you're an Estonian. I'm not talking about being whether you're pro-Russian or not. I'm talking about just domestic politics wise. You are going to be right. That's my prime minister that you are doing this to, and there will be this um, I guess unification of support for aid to Ukraine. There will be unification of condemnation against Russia. So stuff like this acts against Russia's interests, and it's great. Like I love hearing news like this because I know it's gonna be positive for those fighting against Russia's imperialism. Okay, Senator Mitt Romney. So I've talked so much about the Republicans in the Senate and in the House of Representatives who are spouting Russian propaganda and narratives to a really worrying degree. So let's give some props to Republican senators who are definitely not doing this. Whether it's Lisa Murkowski, whether it's in this case Senator Mitt Romney, we are not being asked to send American troops into war. Only to help the Ukrainians defend themselves. If we fail to help Ukraine, Putin will invade a NATO nation. Ukraine is not the end, it's a step. And letting Putin have his way with Europe would jeopardize our security. I mean, I'd love to play you the full 5 minutes here of what Mitt Romney says, but this is good stuff. This is a decent, somewhat old school Republican politician, and he ran for president, didn't he, against Obama, saying it how it is. This is where the Republican Party should be. On the other hand, Speaker Johnson has preemptively rejected Ukraine aid bill as it moves towards the Senate. So we've had this really quite successful passing through the Senate, 70 votes to 29, which I think was fairly good. There's still 29 Republican senators who, I don't know. But before it goes to the House of Representatives, where you've got, I don't know, 430 odd, maybe a bit more uh, lawmakers there who are going to vote on this. The House Speaker, who's kind of in charge of what the Republicans do in a sense, has said that is rejected it. He's not even going to consider it. I mean, this is where we're at. This is where the US is at. US House Speaker Mike Johnson suggested on the 12th that he would not support a $95 billion foreign aid bill that included funding for Ukraine on the grounds that it did not address the ongoing crisis on the southern border. Now, he is admittedly in a tough position. His seat will probably be vacated if he does put it forward, and so there's a lot of self-interest going on in what his actions are at the moment. But this is definitely not cool. The bill, which has slowly progressed through the Senate, allocates $60 billion to Ukraine, 14 billion to Israel, 9 billion to humanitarian support, which is interesting for Gaza. So this is where the bill is quite clever in saying, yeah, we are going to support Israel, right, in general, but we're also going to support uh, Palestinians with the humanitarian crisis that Israel has um, caused. And so this, I guess, is a way of trying to appease both sides of that to some degree. And 4.8, so 5 billion to assist regional partners in the Indo-Pacific. A potential final vote in the Senate could come as early as February the 14th. Well, the Senate's done that now, and it's up to the House of Representatives. I've reported widely on this, but I just thought I'd point out. So this is Elon Musk here. So the worst part here is that the slightest beam of shame for what he's doing now will never spark up his brain in years to come. He's no Henry Ford. So Elon Musk says Putin can't lose in Ukraine, and he opposes the Senate bill. So that's what I've already reported, and it's absolutely terrible. And I know where my thoughts on Elon Musk now are very firmly. The billionaire, but this is what worries me. So he then sorts out as X Spaces. So Twitter Spaces is this video platform that Twitter offers. And he's gotten there with with Republican senators and people like Vivek Ramaswamy, uh, who are just basically anti-Ukraine, and he's just having an anti-Ukraine loving. And he calls allegations that he's a Putin apologist absurd, whilst doing all these things that show he's a Putin apologist. It's really genuinely worrying. Um, yeah, there you go. Uh, so to add to this, it's interesting to look at the media narratives going on in the States at the moment. So you've got Biden running against Trump. Trump has now sort of said that we're not going to come to the help, or he's reporting a conversation where he was talking about not coming to the help of Europe. And he's reporting that conversation in a way that nothing's changed, right? This isn't. So some people have said, "Oh, you don't understand the context of that. That was he's quoting from something a long time ago." Yeah, but he's quoting from that because that's what he now believes, and the crowd around him are clapping that. Okay, so that's his position, which is if Europe don't pay up, we ain't going to come to the help of Europe, and actually, Russia can do what the hell they like. If that's what you think, then NATO is dead to you. And geopolitically speaking, you are just an island that has no interest in alliances with the rest of the world and no interest in the US staying at the top of the hegemonic ladder in the world and being that world leader. You're just interested in, I don't know, whatever benefits you personally as an individual, I guess. Now, what's going on is that instead of shouting about how absolutely mental that is in terms of the last 70 years of US politics and geopolitics and foreign policy, instead of certain news media outlets going to town on this, they're switching the narrative and consistently talking about how Biden's old. Like, yeah, Biden's old. Trump's old. Yeah, Biden's making some gaffes in his speeches, but he's not advocating World War III, and he's not advocating Putin winning. Do you know what? Like, sort out what is the most important news here, and this is just like some kind of Trump cultism that has permeated into the media landscape so that they can't report on something absolutely egregious that Trump said, and they'd rather talk about how Biden is old. So, as this headline is, which is worse, Biden's age or Trump handing NATO to Putin? That's how I read it. This framing from the New York Times shows how much the media has utterly lost the plot. One guy's old, the other guy is old, delusional, is inviting Russia to invade our allies, incited an insurrection, faces 91 felony charges and is a sexual abuser. What is wrong with you? And just moving on to the final bits and pieces, just to remain on US politics, because it's a knife edge really in what's going on in the House of Representatives. Now, there's been a special election there, third congressional district in New York, which George Santos was the representative. He was highly controversial and has basically been ousted for many, many good reasons. This was an interesting area because in what was touted as being the red wave that never happened and became a red ripple, where the Republicans are supposed to like take loads of um, seats across the US some time back. When was the red wave supposed to be? Anyway, it didn't happen. It turned out to be, rather successful for the Democrats, but actually one area that was successful, one of the rare areas around the states where there was this big move towards the Republicans, was in a couple of congressional districts in New York, and this was one of them, and it saw this massive swing towards the Republicans. Well, what's interesting here that the polls were suggesting that there might be a squeezed win for Suozzi by 1 to 4% in the polls, a small margin, and then he's actually gone to smash it by 8% in the election last night. And why do I mention this? Because actually that then reduces the majority of the Republicans in the Senate, which is already a knife edge, and also gives an indication of, I know this is just New York and that's quite different for the rest of the country, but gives an indication of where Republicans and Democrats are, and actually might give a signal to Republicans about how they should play things, maybe with stuff like Ukraine. Like, this could be a warning shot for Republicans that actually they ain't so comfortable. And when it comes to the November elections, the presidential elections and all the other elections that go along with that, they might need to be a little bit careful and consider the other side of the coin. So I just thought that was an interesting election from last night that I think we need to be aware of. Shashank Joshi, yesterday I talked about how a French foreign disinformation watchdog has announced it had detected preparations for a large disinformation campaign in France, Germany, and Poland and other European countries tied to part of the second anniversary of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Well, just thought is worth adding this. Kremlin documents show that Russia has been intensifying its effort to undermine French backing for Ukraine. It also has a clear interest in promoting division in France at a time when Marine Le Pen, so she's in charge of what used to be the Front National, which is now French Rally or France Rally, is riding high in the polls. So she's riding high. But just if you're in France and you're interested in French politics, just remember that her party, there will be amplification of what she says and what her party says that comes from Russia. Just be aware, if you're French, that there will be a lot of manipulation going on, and that manipulation finds its home within the Kremlin. So, yeah, it's a worrying time for international politics and for interference in democratic elections. Checkpoints are blocked on the border with Poland again. 1,250 trucks in queues. We know that Donald Tusk is finding this a very serious thing to try and sort out. It is a problem, and it seems to be at the moment somewhat intractable. Russian exports have fallen by almost a third in 2023, while supplies to Europe fell by 68%. According to Reuters, at the same time, Russia's export and import dependence with Asia has increased. Exports rose by 5.6% to 306 billion. Overall, the share of the region in Russia's exports has increased significantly from 49% to 72% in 2023. There's a real shift in what in Russia's economy, basically, and where their money is going. And that's not good news, particularly for Russia, because they're being forced to buy a lot of this stuff in rupees and yuan rather than in American dollars. And yeah, it's forcing them to not have very liquid cash, not be able to use that money anywhere else other than India or China, for example. So yeah, it's not particularly healthy. Anyway, Estonian Intel annual report said the Kremlin is probably anticipating a possible conflict with NATO within the next decade. I probably should have mentioned this earlier. For Estonia, Russia's military reform entails a significant increase in Russian forces near the Estonian border in the coming years. In the short term, Russia is likely incapable of significantly expanding the production of new armored vehicles. Nevertheless, refurbishing preserved armored vehicles from storage can compensate for losses in Ukraine for several more years. The longer the conflict continues in its current intensity, the more the resulting internal political tensions will deepen. However, as 2024 unfolds, the regime will likely retain sufficient means to maintain control throughout the year. The Estonian Foreign Intelligence Service first noted a shift in Russia's policy toward Israel in early 2023, when Moscow, in contrast to previously neutral stance, began taking markedly anti-Israel positions regarding the Palestine question. Western institutions who interact with Russian academics and think tank experts holding more moderate or acceptable views by Western standards should still be aware that their interactions are highly likely to be reported to FSB counterintelligence. As an FSB agent, Pukov regularly informs his handler, Vinichenko, about his contacts with Western diplomats, events he is invited to, and other individuals, including Russian citizens, who are also invited to these events. Many Russian institutions officially submit regular reports to the FSB about the upcoming contacts with foreigners. Situation in Russia remains largely unchanged from the Soviet era, when the KGB followed a similar practice. EFIS has a sense of humor in their report. For those who prefer not to find their names and images alongside those of Russian intelligence officers in our publications, we extend an invitation to get in touch. We are confident that mutually advantageous arrangements can be negotiated. I mean, this is going back to Soviet era activities, isn't it? And the FSB are the KGB, and Russia appears to be, or the Russian Federation appears to be, just a newer iteration of the Soviet Union in my books. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thanks so much for watching. Please take care, like, subscribe, and share. And yeah, that sinking of another ship could be important. Anyway, toodle pips.